Hi, my name is Nathan Reitinger. I am going to be talking about deniability. This work would not be possible without my co-authors, Nathan, Omer, Ian, and Michelle. So this talk is going to be about denials. So a good place to start is with what are denials and why are they important? So speech happens all the time. We often communicate with each other. We're very social beings. A lot of our speech is very casual, like ordering a sandwich or talking to your spouse. Some speech, though, is incredibly scrutinized. In fact, some speech, just by their utterances alone, can be illegal. The situation I'm referring to are political dissidents, where they are using their speech to motivate their cause and have other people interested. And that speech actually can end up causing them to, go to jail or have their countries want them to go to jail. So the solution for the countries is to make this speech illegal, and that's not a great outcome because that chills speech, it chills ideas that won't ever get out there. So denials can actually really help in this situation because it can allow the dissident to say something like, well, actually, I didn't say that, and so they can keep pursuing their cause, and it's a better solution potentially. It might surprise you to learn that cryptographers have been thinking about denials for a very long time. About 20 years ago, researchers out of Berkeley devised a scheme to provide deniability. The problem at the time was that we had created these secure messaging protocols that were providing people with authentication. And that was really great for verifying that you're speaking with the person you think you're speaking with, but it was not really great for that person being able to deny having said something later on. So what the researchers here did is they took the thing that was causing the problems for denials, the signatures on messages, and they removed it. So we have this no signatures, yes deniability type of situation. So the interesting thing here, though, is that potentially we may have been too caught up in the trees to take stock of the real problem we're trying to solve, which is denials. We are definitely able to get rid of the signatures, but are we actually providing people with deniability? And this is an important question because it's, we actually have denials, the same type of OTR deniability that are on apps that you probably have on your phone right now, like WhatsApp or Signal, which are on 2 billion devices today. So we're going to summarize these questions in our research questions, and we're going to look at what does cryptographic deniability successfully convince people that a denial is the truth, and if it doesn't, or even if it does, could it be better? We're going to handle this question through a couple of user studies. We conducted 2 surveys in total, 600 participants per survey. This was US-based, and we used their prolific crowdsourcing platform. And just to be very specific on the setting we're talking about here, we're talking about making a denial in the face of a leaked text message. So some kind of accusation, and then saying, no, I didn't say that. So we're going to need some kind of leak. This is the leak that we use. You can't read it very well. You're not supposed to right now. It basically says something terrible that this person who was chatting with this other person said. In the scenario that we pose, this is going to be a hypothetical governor, and this hypothetical governor is essentially saying, I'm committing bribery right now in no uncertain terms. So the governor is going to eventually have a chance to respond to this accusation, and they're going to say, no, this actually is not true. I did not say those things, right? They could have an alibi. They could have a bunch of different things they could say in response. So we're calling this our deniability evidence. And this survey is really built around the different types of deniability evidence that we have, and then which of those is more or less successful. And I'm going to walk through each of our forms of deniability evidence right now. So for starters, we just have a baseline condition. And this condition is really a sanity check on whether denials are needed today. So Photoshop has been around for a long time. Fake news, disinformation, and deep fakes are becoming popular terms in today's culture. And with that type of background, we wondered, is it possible that these tools have already solved our problem for us? Do people just not really believe bare screenshots anymore? Because we all know that you could probably fake one pretty easily. So is deniability needed is essentially what we're doing with that baseline condition. The next 2 conditions are built around experts who are certifying that this type of protocol, that cryptographic deniability standard, is what was used on the text message exchange that we see this leak occurring in. So here, on the one hand, we're going to use some jargon, and we're going to say things like there's no cryptographic proof of authorship, or we used a triple Diffie-Hellman handshake that comes from Signal. And then we're also testing to see if it makes a difference if we remove that type of jargon and just say, hey, no record was left here, anyone can fake a transcript, right? So are experts able to convince people that those denials are successful? The next three forms of evidence are what we call our tools-based evidence. And here we're really drilling down on the idea that you can edit anything in a transcript. If we give people the ability to modify messages, either delete content or add content, that editability, is that something that convinces people that a denial is the truth? And I'm just going to briefly show an example of one of the conditions we have. This is built on our GUI condition, and we can see how a participant would be able to edit a message or delete a message or essentially do whatever they want. And this image looks exactly the same as that fake screenshot I showed you in the beginning. OK, so these are the three forms of those tool space, and I'm just going to briefly talk about each of them. So the first is that tools exist, and this is essentially saying, hey, this type of protocol exists out there, anybody can edit anything, and we're not really going to give you much more than that. The second is the tool triable, and here we gave in the survey participants a chance to use that GUI and modify things however they wanted. And then the third is our what we call proactive. This comes from a real-world example that I won't get into here, because it's a bit complicated. But essentially, the person who's being accused says, hey, you can't believe this because I actually send fake messages to a bunch of people all the time. So you don't know that this later fake message that came out was not one of the fake ones that I sent, because that's just what I like doing. OK, so here we have our 6 different forms of deniability evidence. We're going to encapsulate these in a survey and then measure which of those is more or less successful. So I'll briefly talk about how that survey works. We're going to have a leak, and before I move on, it's important to note that we actually couch this scenario in a legal setting because there's a couple of properties that are actually really nice that come from the legal setting that allows us to use it here. One of those is that participants will in some ways be forced to make a decision, which is a very natural thing in a courtroom, but often not a natural thing in real world. And another nice property that comes from this is that participants are told to only consider the deniability evidence before them, to ignore external factors. So this is a kind of a sequestration type idea. It comes from the law. And essentially it says, hey, you may not know all the facts of what's going on here, but based on what I told you, I need you to make a decision. So after we have the leak, we're going to have a denial. This is where the governor says, hey, that's not true. And we're going to have our 6 different forms of deniability evidence. We're going to vary these per group and make sure our groups are even so that our stat test will work. And then we're going to have participants make a decision. And this decision will be one of belief. I believe this, I believe that. And also guilt. Is the governor guilty? Is the governor not guilty? So to recap, we're looking at, does cryptographic deniability successfully convince people that a denial is the truth? And can we do better? So I'm going to get into our results in a bit, but I just want to note quickly that participants here are going to be responding to the general question of whether this screenshot is real. And we're going to have our conditions shown on the left there, and then the red is for a real. I believe the screenshot is real. Blue is generally fake. So we can see in our baseline condition that a lot of our participants are believing the screenshot is real. So without verifying the screenshot at all or saying any particular reason why you should believe it, most participants are believing it. They're not believing the governor when the governor says it's not real. And so on one hand, we've found that we do need deniability. We're not just getting this for free because Photoshop exists. We need our protocols to give us something if we want denials to be real. And then we also found this really nice trend line in a lot of our deniability evidence that shows that people are believing the screenshot is real less and less and less as we kind of progress here. There was a bit of an oddball with that tool proactive condition, and if you're interested, you can see our paper for that. But on the whole, it's looking good for deniability evidence. And I'll note here that we found a significant difference between the baseline, when the baseline is compared to all of the other conditions. So we can see that in these conditions, we have a 5, 6, 8, and 10 times more likely outcome that a participant is going to say, yes, I believe that screenshot is fake. This is not real. So it's, at this point in time, we've shown that we can have better deniability based on these other conditions, but we don't necessarily know which of these is the best. Our intergroup comparisons did not have statistical significance to tell us that one of these was better than the other. So we ran a follow-up survey, survey 2, where we drilled down on these specific forms of deniability evidence. The first we felt had the best chance at giving a successful denial in the expert-based conditions. That's why we chose it. And the next 2, the tool exists and tool triable, we wanted to see if that GUI was really making a difference, and if just having it exists, which we felt was not very likely, if that would matter. So these results are very similar to our previous results. So we were able to show that generally the same kind of trends are true, but we're also able to get some statistical significance out of it. So on this time, we learned that expert-friendly and tool-triable, there is a difference there. So people who have the ability, that GUI, the ability to edit the text messages, are more likely to believe that a denial is true than those in expert-friendly. So experts are not as successful at convincing people that a denial is real. We also found that there was not a statistically significant difference between tool triable and tool exists. So you would think that giving people a GUI would really convince them versus just telling them that this protocol exists, but that was not the case. So that's also an interesting finding. So in summary, cryptographic deniability works. The thing that we have right now to give us deniability does work. We can't say it doesn't, but it can do better. We found that we have these tools-based conditions, and those are able to get us into more and more successful denials. So I'm going to pause here for questions. Thank you for listening.
Hi, this is Sarah from Princeton. I'm interested in the fact that a lot of people in this survey 1 seem to go from believing it was real to believing it was fake, as opposed to believing it was real to not being sure whether it was fake or real. Can you talk about that?
So why some people were finding that the unsure camp, I guess.
Well, I guess, should I conclude from the fact that a tool exists that can doctor screenshots that this particular screenshot is doctored? To me, it seems like in some sense, the right answer to the survey would have been, we don't know whether this is fake or real because there exists a tool to generate fake screenshots, but it could have been a real screenshot. That's like the point of deniability. So I'm curious about this.
Yeah, this is probably an artifact of the courtroom setting that we were putting people in. And so that particular question does come from beliefs. That was not an action-based question. That was not a decision of judgment. But at the same time, I think it only strengthens the deniability evidence. And a lot of people were in those camps of unsure and then moved over. And so it's just an interesting finding.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it makes a difference if the person who claimed to have taken the screenshot is in presence of the person who has to judge if it is a genuine screenshot or a fake.
Yeah, this is a great question. So a lot of those contextual variables we decided to take out of the survey because it was so difficult to control the way that people would feel. And so we actually did not tell them where the screenshot comes from or who even gave the screenshot in the first place. We just said, here's the screenshot, it exists. So we imagine that follow-up work could drill down on whether this courtroom scenario is practical outside of the courtroom and other scenarios where we have more real life, like realistic types of leak situations happen, whether it still holds up.
So I will just kind of go back to what was just asked, but maybe from a different angle, which is, what are your thoughts about people just, given that there's a tool like this, just using it a lot for, a lot of cases just fooling their friends, making memes, but also, and I know that in some sense that's the goal, but I feel like people are still just, Photoshop exists, like you said, and so people are just going to use this to do semi-nefarious things, at least.
So why do we need deniability if these tools exist? Is the same?
No, it's just like if the tool, if you put a tool out there that makes it just easier to do this, do you think that the balance of outcomes is going to be more positive or more negative?
In terms of a successful denial. So I think
not just in terms of denial, all of the consequences. So I think basically if you just make things easier to make fake stuff, people will make a bunch of fake stuff, and there will be consequences to the fake stuff, even if there's more deniability for all the things?
Yes. Okay, so I think we're on the same point here. So this was a point I had that I wasn't able to get to, but there are absolutely costs associated with making this, making deniability more practical. I think that if this is something we want to pursue, this is not a technical paper, we didn't develop this, but if this is going to be out there, we need to consider that this in some sense degrades the trust of interpersonal relationships and all types of communications. And so if, it might be a worthy objective to develop this, but we will absolutely have to consider those.
Thanks.
Great. So thanks again, Nathan.